lot of you might not know this, but Christopher Nolan almost picked a different Batman villain before going with Bane for The Dark Knight Rises. I'm really glad they didn't. Now, there's still a chance we could see The Dark Knight 4, even if Christian Bale has one big condition for coming back. Plus, we've got the scoop on why Nolan never made a fourth Batman movie. So let's dive into everything we know about The Dark Knight Returns. In a 2022 interview while promoting Thor: Love and Thunder, Christian Bale made it clear that he'd only return to the Dark Knight franchise if Christopher Nolan was involved. Bale explained that after completing the trilogy, he and Nolan had agreed to move on, but he'd be open to coming back if Nolan had a compelling new story. Here's what he said. "I had a pact with Nolan. We said, hey look, let's make 3 films, if we're lucky enough to do that, and then let's walk away. Let's not linger too long. If Chris Nolan ever felt he had another story to tell and wanted to tell it with me, I'd be in." Given that it's only been 2 years since this statement, it seems likely that Bale would stick to his word. Even though Thor: Love and Thunder didn't land as well as hoped, Nolan's recent success with Oppenheimer, which won Best Director and Best Picture at the 2023 Oscars, makes working with him an attractive opportunity. Unfortunately, Nolan has been recently more straightforward about his stance on returning to the superhero genre. Then, in a 2023 interview with Hugo Decrypte while promoting Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan was asked if he'd direct another superhero movie, and he responded with a firm no. This statement seems to close the door on him returning to his Dark Knight franchise or diving into any new superhero projects, whether in the DCU or MCU. However, Nolan's brother Jonathan isn't as set against the idea of a new Dark Knight film. Jonathan Nolan, known for co-writing some of Christopher's most acclaimed films like Memento, The Prestige, and Interstellar, the latter earning him an Oscar nomination, also worked on The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. In a recent interview with Screen Rant, Jonathan expressed his eagerness to revisit the franchise, saying, "Wouldn't that be a dream? That period was about 10 years of my life, from when I got the call to work on Batman Begins in 2003 to putting out The Dark Knight Rises in 2012, and it was epic. The chance to work with Christian, Heath, Morgan Freeman, Michael Caine, and the extraordinary cast of those films, a sort of American icon. So if I had the chance to go back and work on that again, absolutely." This statement, made in May 2024, is promising. Jonathan has also made a name for himself in TV with shows like Person of Interest and Westworld, and recently directed episodes of the Fallout series. With his deep understanding of the trilogy and his experience in directing, Jonathan seems well equipped to take over from Christopher if needed. This development could potentially sway Christian Bale, who might consider returning if the story and team are right, even without Nolan at the helm. Jonathan Nolan mentioned on the Happy Sad Confused podcast that he originally wanted the Riddler to be the main villain in The Dark Knight Rises. However, since he was responsible for the screenplay rather than the story, the film ended up featuring Tom Hardy's Bane. Goyer and Nolan decided to focus on Batman rather than having the villain lead the story. With Matt Reeves, the Batman, introducing Paul Dano's Riddler in 2022, it seems unlikely that a potential Dark Knight 4 would revisit this character. Interestingly, Warner Brothers had considered Leonardo DiCaprio for the Riddler role before the film settled on Bane. Returning to the Dark Knight franchise more than 12 years later would be challenging. If Nolan were to bring Christian Bale back, the now 50-year-old actor could still physically portray the role, as his performance as Gore the God Butcher shows. However, the age difference might be noticeable, making it more plausible for Bale to continue as a retired Bruce Wayne. Additionally, The Dark Knight Rises set up Joseph Gordon-Levitt's Robin John Blake as a potential successor to Bruce Wayne. Given that Gordon-Levitt is now 43, it might be tough to cast him as a young sidekick. Instead, the story could explore Blake as an experienced Batman, with Bale's Bruce Wayne taking on a more supportive role. If The Dark Knight 4 were to get the green light from DC Studios, it would likely be classified as a DC Elseworlds project. The situation is already complex, with Matt Reeves' The Batman trilogy, also an Elseworlds project, still in progress, and the new DC Universe's Batman in the Brave and the Bold potentially set to clash with existing versions. Introducing another Batman, whether Bale's or Gordon-Levitt's, could further complicate DC's live-action lineup, making it a less likely prospect. The Brave and the Bold doesn't have a release date yet, and DC Studios might wait until Pattinson's trilogy wraps up before moving forward. Currently, The Batman ranks as DC Studios' fourth highest-grossing Batman film, with Batman vs. Superman in between it and The Dark Knight. Given that the trilogy is set to continue in 2025, focusing on this series may be more strategic for DC than reviving a decade-old franchise. Additionally, it's uncertain whether Jonathan Nolan could even assemble the original cast for a sequel. Given these factors, the chances for a sequel to The Dark Knight Rises seem slim, despite the potential appeal for the franchise's key players. On the flip side, a fourth Dark Knight Rises movie was never in the cards, according to Joseph Gordon-Levitt. In a July 2024 interview with Inverse, Gordon-Levitt explained, "Nolan was making a trilogy. He never wanted to make any more movies. This was an ending to his trilogy." It's funny, we look back on it now with the context of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Everything is a sequel to a sequel to a sequel. But back in those olden days, doing a trilogy was a lot, and that was how it was thought of. Gordon-Levitt's insight highlights that there were no concrete plans for a fourth film, despite The Dark Knight Rises setting up his character, Robin John Blake, as a potential future Batman. His perspective is particularly valuable since he would have been involved in any discussions about continuing the series, making his view significant. He also points out how different the superhero movie landscape was back then. While ongoing series and sequels are almost a given now, the genre was viewed differently at the time of the trilogy's creation. Nolan's vision was always meant to conclude with 3 films, and the setup for a potential future in The Dark Knight Rises might seem more like a teaser in today's post-credit scene culture. Even though a reunion between Nolan and Bale seems unlikely, the expanding DC universe might offer a way for Bale's Bruce Wayne to make a comeback. After James Gunn and Peter Safran took over DC Studios in late 2022, they announced that projects like Reeves' The Batman franchise, including the upcoming Batman Part 2 and various spin-off series, and Phillips' Joker franchise, with Joker Folie à Deux set for 2024, would be part of the Elseworlds category. This opens up the possibility for multiple Batmen to cross paths in future DC films. For instance, 2023's The Flash featured Barry Allen encountering 3 different versions of Batman, played by Michael Keaton, George Clooney, and Ben Affleck. Similarly, Marvel's Spider-Man No Way Home brought together Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland's Spider-Man in one film. So, while a direct sequel to The Dark Knight Rises might not happen, there's still a chance Christian Bale could return as Batman, especially since he hasn't completely ruled out the idea. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one. What do you think? Could we see Christian Bale's Batman make a return in the expanding DC universe, or do you think the series should move forward with new characters? Your suggestions for future videos are always welcome in the comments below.